Hey guys, Wilson3 here. So today I'm going to be giving you a build guide straight from a completely bare PC. So this is the case I've got here. It's a decent case, but these cables always get in the way. It's the power supply. It's 250 watts. It's got one singular SATA cable, bunch of Molex. I got it for around £5. It's MATX, and also there's a bent screw on it, so I mean, I wouldn't call it amazing, but it's okay. This is the RAM, so I've got 712 megabytes, and they both run at 667 megahertz. I was going to have 2 gigabytes, however, I bought 2 gigabytes, and MemTest64 wouldn't work on it. It was that many errors it couldn't boot. So this is an AMD Athlon X2 64-bit, 3400 plus. It basically came in a little plastic bag. All the pins on the corners were bent, but I got it for £2.19. So it's a very good deal. I mean, if it hadn't been shipped across the world in a literal plastic bag, only a plastic bag. So I was able to fix all of the pins. As you can see, they're all nice. And ew, my finger's looking really gross right then. I cut my finger, and basically that's it. After it just came out of a plaster, it's all gross. Please don't demonetize me. Anyway, so that's the CPU. This is the cooler. It's a little bit limiting because it's very small. You can't overclock. There's very little weight to it. The fan is really loud. I actually changed it out with this super cheap fan. It runs off Molex. It's that loud. It has this little cheap, like, lasping system. Just lasps onto the socket, and it's 3-pin fan connector. However, the RPM pin, for some reason, doesn't work. This is the motherboard. I wouldn't say it's great. I got it for £14. You can see it's got PCIe 1 and 16X and everything. It's got DDR2. However, I've had so many issues with DDR2. It's AM2 socket, which is kind of limiting since it's quite hard to find good CPUs with AM2 budget on a budget. So yeah, the RAM I've had so many issues with. Issues that I shouldn't have been having. It's got 4 SATA ports and 1 PATA, which I'm going to be using the PATA drive. It's got onboard graphics. However, the onboard graphics I would assume has overheated at some point, since basically there's a huge amount of artifacting. Basically, the whole computer's unusable on onboard graphics. Yeah, so we're just going to start off. I've put RAM and CPU into the motherboard. And if you're putting a GPU in, I wouldn't recommend putting it in, but RAM, CPU, a back plate, possibly even a cooler. That's all stuff they'd want to put in. The reason I haven't put the cooler in is because it basically gets stuck on the power supply when the power supply is getting dropped in. So because of the nature of how cramped it is in this £12 computer case, I am having to do stuff in a very odd order. Instead of motherboard first, which is what you'd normally do, you'd just take your motherboard and plop it in. I'm doing the power supply first, since it wouldn't fit, basically. There's also a little capacitor that's getting bent. Now I may as well just put the I/O shield on now, since, I mean, you've got the most space. It's also got a printer and FireWire on it, which, I mean, FireWire is cool and all, but holy hell, that's really old. Really old. And I'm trying to put it in upside down. Whew. It's, oh wait, that's not upside down. Oh yeah, and if it looks bent, it's because I have a fisheye lens on my camera and I can't be bothered to take it off. The case is kind of flexy. flexible. However, brand new for £12 with next day delivery. Who can complain? And it came very well packaged. And I mean, it's strong enough that I've actually got my monitor sitting on top of it right now. But yeah, and it also comes with eSATA, audio, USB 1.0, hard drive indicator, turn on switch, power indicator. It comes with, oh yeah, and reset switch. It basically comes with everything you want. Anyway, oh yeah, and you have to bend. The camera just fell over. That's embarrassing. You have to bend out the little slats, like slits, to install a GPU. So that's not amazing, because it means if you ever want, like if you put a dual slot card in, and then one day you want to downgrade it to a single slot, you'd have a little bit of issues with that, with a big blank space. So here's the power supply again, 250, actually is it 300? It's either 250 or 300 watts. Yeah, one of the screws is bent, so I can actually only use two, which is not great, especially feels super flimsy when you're plugging in the power cable. As you can see, I am having a little bit of trouble pushing it in, but £12 case, so I mean, I would expect R&D into the case is almost non-existent. So as you can see, the top two screws, they're fine, but the bottom screw isn't fine. So joys of buying secondhand. I've tried bending it out, and I'm not opening the power supply. I'm shoving some pliers in there to properly bend it out. But I tried screwing a screw in, then pulling the screw, and all that did was strip the thread on the screw. So not great. And you can see I'm just going to screw it in here. And also this is an OEM power supply, so you see it's got the little fan bit sticking out, which honestly just makes my whole life just that bit harder when it comes to installing the motherboard, since basically interferes with everything. Like the fit is within millimeters of clearance, and I had to cut off the locking mechanism on the CPU power, so wouldn't at all say if I was doing this again that I'd buy an OEM power supply. I would buy a proper M-ATX power supply, but I'd already bought an ATX one in anticipation that it was going to be ATX, and I'd already spent £5 on that one, and that one was like 400 watts, so not a bad deal. However, I just decided, I just want to see this thing boot up. It actually took me multiple months of work to try and get it to boot, and eventually it booted, and now I just mess around. So as you can see, the motherboard's going in. I'm just trying to line up the I/O. However, I dropped the motherboard at this point. It's the scariest moment of my life. Like, listening to the video, you can actually hear it go clunk. Are you ready for it? Right, I also hold the RAM. I had an anti-static band around my leg, but not good. And then you can actually see the whole motherboard flex and then snap back into place as it snaps into its rightful place if you watch around CMOS battery. It flexes enough that it shakes my floor when it snaps back and shakes the camera, so you know that thing was under a lot of strain. So you see, I'm just lining it up now with the I/O shield. It's quite a bit off. It's too far back. There's a lot of static. I've tried fixing up the lighting as well as I could. I believe at this point I realised that I put the I/O shield on upside down. Yeah. And then everything has to come back out and go back in, which is just amazing. So you see, it's not that hard to pop back out. I've never met an I/O shield that isn't easy to pop in and out. see, I just flip it over with the motherboard and everything in there, because not doing the motherboard drop again. So that's not at all good for your motherboard. I'm surprised that motherboard actually still works. But yeah, and then I have loads of issues trying to line up the IO shield, because I'm trying to avoid blocking the camera's view, but that just, I give up on that. I can get all in the way of it in a few minutes. There you go. And it all just clicks into place nice. So, you know, it'll be in soon, please. Can I make it in person? Yeah. It's not easy when you're working in a constricted space. That's why I would always double check that you've got your IO shield on the right way up, since they do actually go in upside down, which surprised me when I first learnt that they went upside down, but they do. So yeah, just always check before you put it in so you can avoid all of this, and then you can see I basically give up on getting a good shot of it, and it's in. And it's not in. Okay. Yeah, you can see it's not at all easy to get this in. Once you get corner going, it's very easy. See, I got the top of it on, I think. Yeah. It also doesn't help when your case flexes like that, but I mean, it was so cheap it doesn't matter. Nearly. Alright, there we go. So it's now in. So I'm just gonna turn this over so I can know dear what's happening with the camera here. Right. So you can see it's now in. And you can just, you see it's not popping out again. Should hopefully all be good. So now I just begin lining the motherboard up with the IO shield. And just like that, it's lined up, and the IO shield won't come out because the motherboard holds it in. So you don't have to worry about it falling out. Also, I pre-installed the standoffs. So you'd have to install a standoffs, which are the little golden things it screws into. Before, I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but I'd recommend watching through the whole of this a few times before you go and attempt. So, and I just realised the CMOS is actually in the reset position. However, I've corrected that. You can see I just begin screwing it in. So, oh yeah, another thing I'd also recommend counting out your screws before you start. So, I think there should be 6 on an MATX board. Oh yeah, and if you're building a computer, always check your form factors, because it's never good. So here you can see the 24 pin. I've had a lot of trouble with getting the 24 pin split up into 20 pin and 4 pin, and they have to connect with each other. However, I've had a lot of issues with getting the 24 pin to go in together, because the 20 either takes up too much space or takes up too little, and then the 4 pin takes up too much space, even though it's the right way around. So don't quite know what's going on there. You see, I just leave the 4 pin out here, I believe. Also, the motherboard was flexing a lot. When the motherboards flex, you should always try and keep flexing to a minimum, because when they flex, little tiny little contacts, the basically trails that run through the motherboard, can snap, and never ever good when stuff snaps. So yeah, you can see that. So eventually I give up on trying to plug it in. You see how there's very little space and there's huge amounts of flex. Oh my god, look at that, that looks so bad. Anyway, so yeah, you see it doesn't go in. A more premium power supply, they should actually interlock with each other, but this is quite clearly not a premium power supply. So you can see the SATA there. The camera keeps bouncing around, but it's SATA, so I'm going to connect the eSATA up into the SATA. eSATA is basically just it's basically SATA but smaller, and it's designed so you can just plug a hard drive in to the eSATA. And panel connectors are always hell. If you can, then I'd totally recommend getting them in before you put the motherboard in. But I'm just going to put the USB connector on. Make sure it says USB on both of them, and they won't go in the wrong way around, so don't try forcing it. Also, it's a really blurry image. I tried my best to fix it. I also kind of look like I'm in The Simpsons. Anyway, I was doing a lot of color correction because this was extremely dark when I recorded it, even though it wasn't dark. So I don't think this actually has high definition audio, the motherboard. So I'm trying to currently find a high definition audio port, and I just put it into a port that it fitted into, which is normally fine with computers, surprisingly. You can just push something in. It's quite hard to go wrong with computers. Unless you're talking about static electricity, and it's not at all hard to go wrong with computers. However, most of the parts in this computer were worth less than £2.50 each. So yeah, you can see the god-awful case connectors there. And I believe I'm looking out another part, because I think I abandoned doing the case connectors because they were just utter hell. So as you can see, the fan is unbelievably close to the connector. Not at all good. And as I say, I had to cut off the locking mechanism for it, but it still goes in nice and easy. Eventually, I believe I bought an adapter. Actually, no, that's the adapter there, you see, because I was having power delivery issues, and now it works fine. So I'm assuming the adapter fixed power delivery issues, because something like the power supply wasn't supplying enough wattage for its CPU power. However, it was supplying enough through the adapter, and the adapter cost me a lot. I also had to change the CMOS battery since it's a used computer, and the CMOS battery, I think, was half the problem. As you can see, I'm just checking they are properly in, because they're always with adapters like that, for some reason they always don't fit in. I don't know why. So yeah, I believe I'm looking out the CPU cooler. Never ever forget the CPU cooler, and that's be a bad mistake. So I'm just currently working out how to get the fan the most efficient route around. So for this, basically you hook one end onto the bracket, and then the other end you push down with a little thumb place that you can push on it. So you see, I hooked up one end and then completely fought with it to get the other end down, because it was not at all easy. And I was also kind of worried that I'd snap the motherboard, because there's a lot of force going on that, and it's probably quite uneven. And if you're installing CPU cooler, you've always got to make the force even, because if it's not even, then you run a really, really big chance of damaging the motherboard. And because this is a cheaper cooler, obviously they didn't think that through in the design. Like, the cooler was something like £1.50 plus 50p postage charges from China, so I really, really highly doubt it was worth more than like 20p or something, to be honest. So you see, I got it on in the end, and I just take that and route it under so it wouldn't get stuck or cause the fan any issues, and then I just plug it into CPU fan power. As I said, the RPM for some reason, the RPM reading part of it just is broken. I would assume it's probably a 2-pin fan that's been modified to look like a 3-pin fan, and basically it comes up with CPU fan error because it never tells it its speed, it just draws electricity. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's a 2-pin fan and they just tried to attach a 3-pin connector to make it fit into most cases. So yeah, I had to turn off don't continue without if it's not receiving RPM. Yeah, so that's basically the computer. It's very nice. Yeah, I just use it as server now. To be honest, I quite like the computer, and so the total cost was something like £50. So if you're on a budget, I wouldn't at all recommend this. I would recommend you buy a OEM computer that's come from an office, then just put a GPU in it. Anyway, bye. And it's not stopping.